Tonight at 10, on the eve of the budget, confirmation that the furlough scheme is to be extended to the end of September.
This is the budget document for tomorrow.
Chancellor is set to pledge more support for jobs and businesses as the COVID restrictions are gradually lifted across the UK. The furlough scheme will be continued until the crisis is over, with workers receiving their 80% of current salary.
It was manageable, and like I said, without it, people wouldn't be able I definitely wouldn't have been able to pay my bills, and then there's potential for losing your house and getting in a lot of trouble.
And the total cost to the taxpayer for all the support schemes is likely to be more than £100 billion. Also tonight, Nicola Sturgeon under increasing pressure as First Minister of Scotland over the way that she handled the allegations of harassment against her predecessor, Alex Salmond. The mass vaccination programme is one reason why the number of COVID deaths in England and Wales has fallen by more than a quarter in a week. We report on China's policy of moving hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs and other minorities to factories often far from home.
Too far to go!
And the Anfield legend Ian St John, a major force in the rebuilding of Liverpool Football Club, has died at the age of 82.
And coming up in sport on BBC News.
Good evening. The Chancellor, Rishi Sunak, will use tomorrow's budget to pledge more support for jobs and businesses as the COVID restrictions are gradually lifted across the UK. But he'll also warn that the policy of doing whatever it takes will have to come to an end once the crisis is over, because action will then be needed to repair the public finances. Tomorrow he'll announce a continuation of the furlough scheme until the end of September, with workers receiving 80% of their current salary. More than 600,000 people are set to be added to the Self-Employment Income Support Scheme, and the overall support schemes are likely now to cost the taxpayer more than £100 billion. Our economics editor Faisal Islam looks at the furlough extension and other parts of tomorrow's budget.
It is incredible to think last year's budget didn't even contain the word furlough. Official confirmation of a pandemic coming hours afterwards, rendering most of the numbers obsolete. And yet, even before tomorrow's budget, another lengthy extension confirmed.
Hi everybody, I'm David, the head chef of the Porterhouse in Andersley.
David in Nottinghamshire has one of 11 million jobs that have been supported so far. Head chef at a restaurant, he's used his time to try to help teach cooking cheaply for families. An extension essential, he says.
It's been tough. Like I said, without it, people wouldn't be able I definitely wouldn't have been able to pay my bills, and then there's potential for losing your house and getting in a lot of trouble, and mentally as well. It would be really, really tough.
So far in this crisis, unemployment has gone up only modestly, but add in those on the furlough scheme and the separate support scheme for the self-employed changes the picture dramatically, showing how the rescues prevented mass unemployment. The extension now is aimed to prevent a rapid rise in unemployment at the end of the scheme. The BBC understands that forecasts for peak joblessness will be revised down tomorrow.
So this is the budget document for tomorrow.
The Chancellor Rishi Sunak today was putting the final touches to his budget speech, meeting young workers on a video call. He promised to deploy the full fiscal firepower of the Treasury to protect livelihoods, the theme of the Budget Red Book, which will also stretch to a similar extension of the £20 a week universal credit increase and include hundreds of thousands of previously excluded self-employed workers in the support packages. This is another huge intervention worth £10–15 billion, worthy of a budget in and of itself. The point is to take some of those millions of jobs in effective hibernation and help employers bring them straight back into the workforce while the vaccine helps reopen the economy. After the jabs, the jobs, that at least is the hope. That can't be guaranteed though. The real test of these schemes will be in just how many such jobs, for example at this Essex events company, are switched back on when something like normality returns. They could have done with the certainty earlier, they say.
the possibility of going back to work is what people want. I think it maybe is a little bit too late now to be introducing support. It would be lovely, but it would have been lovely for it to happen 6 months, a year ago.
The opposition says the moves should have come months ago. The government has found another kitchen sink to throw at preventing a post-pandemic jobs crisis. Faisal Islam, BBC News.
Well, let's go live to Westminster then on the eve of the budget and talk to our Deputy Political Editor, Vicky Young. Faisal took us through some of those figures there, Vicky, including that figure of more than £100 billion for all of these support schemes. What are the political calculations the Chancellor will be making tomorrow?
Well, it's incredible, isn't it? Almost a year on that the economy is still needing so much emergency support, and that crisis part of this, if you like, is still an important part of tomorrow. There's also the Chancellor laying out a longer-term vision for the economy and how it might operate. And then there's the politically probably much trickier part, because Rishi Sunak has said that he's going to be honest about difficult decisions ahead. Now, the question is beyond the language telling us all that these bills do need to be paid at some point. How much detail will there actually be? Because, of course, what he's trying to do is do enough to reassure those Conservatives who think, yes, he does have to start getting a control of borrowing as soon as possible and start doing that right now. And then he's got, of course, lots of his own MPs who quite like the extra spending and support there's been for their communities and want it to go on beyond the autumn. So that's the balance he's trying to strike. I think there'll be a small step tomorrow towards tax rises, but actually how extensive they're going to be, who ultimately will pay them, well, that's going to be part of the political debate here for many years, not just tomorrow.
Vicky, many thanks. Vicky Young there for us with the latest thoughts on tomorrow's budget. Now, the First Minister of Scotland, Nicola Sturgeon, is under mounting pressure tonight following the latest revelations about the Scottish Government's handling of allegations of harassment which were made against Alex Salmond, the former First Minister. As part of an official inquiry, the government has published emails showing that it carried on with the legal battle against Mr Salmond, despite the government's lawyers advising that it was likely to lose. Further evidence from two other witnesses has called into question Nicola Sturgeon's version of events. She's due to face the parliamentary inquiry herself tomorrow. Our Scotland editor Sarah Smith is in Glasgow with the latest tonight.
Yeah, and tonight you can really feel the political pressure intensifying on Nicola Sturgeon, as she's now facing direct calls for her resignation from the opposition and facing a vote of no confidence in Parliament. And tomorrow she'll be facing intense questioning in front of the Salmond inquiry about the legal advice the government's released tonight, but also about the numerous other ways Alex Salmond alleges she's breached the ministerial code. These former friends have worked their entire careers for one purpose: Scottish independence. Now their bitter feud could threaten that goal, as Nicola Sturgeon's position as First Minister is now on the line. Scottish Conservatives plan to submit a vote of no confidence in her. Without an SNP majority in Parliament, she cannot be certain to survive that vote. Whilst fighting a court battle with Alex Salmond in 2018, the Scottish Government received legal advice that's been published tonight, and it shows their lawyers were worried. In September, they said, "We think there is a real risk the court may be persuaded by the petitioner's case based on procedural unfairness." In October, "This represents a very real problem indeed. The procedure was not followed." In December, they're saying, "Council are of the view that the least worst option would be to concede the petition, although the Lord Advocate advised the government to continue the case." And the lawyers are clearly furious when they say, "We have each experienced extreme professional embarrassment as a result of assurances we've been given turning out to be false as a result of the revelation of further documents." The Scottish Government conceded they had acted unlawfully on the 8th of January, and Alex Salmond was paid more than £500,000 in legal costs.
The government should have conceded the case months earlier, yet they kept dragging it out against senior counsel's advice. That is just unthinkable, because the First Minister should not behave unlawfully in pursuing a case that she knows is lost.
This legal advice could be a very serious problem for Nicola Sturgeon, and it's far from her only problem. She is also being accused of misleading Parliament over what she knew and when about the allegations against Alex Salmond. Nicola Sturgeon originally told Parliament that the first she knew of harassment complaints against Alex Salmond was on the 2nd of April 2018, when he told her at a meeting in her home. She later had to admit she had forgotten about another meeting on the 29th of March with Salmon's former Chief of Staff, in which he says the complaints were discussed. Nicola Sturgeon's also been asked if the name of one of the women making a complaint was shared at that meeting.
To the very best of my knowledge, I do not think that happened.
The committee has tonight published letters from two people who say they were told by Salmon's former aide the name of a complainer that was shared at that meeting.
Well, that is naked opportunism from the Scottish Tories. They haven't heard, of course, the First Minister's evidence, and they've decided that she's misled Parliament. They haven't waited for the independent investigation into the ministerial code and decided already that she has breached it. So they aren't interested in listening to the facts.
Tomorrow, Nicola Sturgeon will spend hours refuting all these allegations under oath in front of the Salmond inquiry, knowing she's now fighting for her political life. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Glasgow.
The number of coronavirus deaths in England and Wales has fallen by more than a quarter in a week, according to the Office for National Statistics. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, says the reduction is as a result of the mass vaccinations and the lockdown. He also revealed that the search for an unidentified person who tested positive for the Brazilian strain of the virus has now been narrowed down to a few hundred homes in the southeast of England. Our health editor, Hugh Pym, has more details.
The streets may still look quiet, but we're on the road to recovery. That's the message from ministers in England today, with positive news about the impact of vaccines on preventing serious illness and deaths. And the hunt for a missing person infected with a Brazilian variant of coronavirus has been narrowed down to 379 households in the southeast of England.
Mr. Speaker,
the Health Secretary, while warning of the need for caution, gave MPs an upbeat assessment.
That the vaccine is working, reducing the number of deaths among those who were vaccinated first and preventing hospital admissions. This is real-world evidence that the vaccine is protecting the NHS and saving lives.
One measure of the COVID impact is the total number of excess deaths in the UK. This line shows the 5-year weekly average for total reported deaths. And here's what's been happening since the start of 2020. And there was a sharp spike last April, largely because of COVID. Then the numbers fell back again before another steep increase at the end of last year and into January. Since then, the number has been falling back. This map shows cases per 100,000 people last week in different parts of the UK. Light blue shows the lowest numbers. Overall totals have been falling, but there are still some hotspots, including in central and eastern England, shown here in red. The numbers are moving in the right direction, but there's still intense strain on the front line of the NHS, with no sign of respite for hospital staff.
As the cases come down, they're coming down from a really high level, and across our whole membership, we're hearing from NHS leaders that COVID-19 remains a major pressure.
Russell is normally fit and active, but he's recovering from COVID at home after leaving hospital last week.
It's like drowning. It's horrible.
He'd been in a ward where others did not pull through. His message is, don't think COVID has gone away.
It's so serious. And I've seen people pass by and it's not very nice. People might think they're immune from it or they're scared of the vaccine. Oh, I wish I got the vaccine in me.
It's a reminder that the vaccination programme has a way to go and that people are still getting very sick with COVID. But the overall picture is looking brighter than it was. Hugh Pym, BBC News.
So let's have a look then at the official figures in this pandemic. They show that there were 6,391 new cases, new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. It means an average of 7,680 new cases were recorded per day in the past week. Across the UK, 12,748 people are in hospital right now with coronavirus. In the last 24 hours, 343 deaths have been recorded of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. On average, 284 deaths were announced every day in the past week, and that brings the total number of people who've died so far to 123,296. Let me show you the vaccination figures, and they show that 203,168 people had their first dose of a vaccine in the latest 24-hour period. It means that in total, nearly 20.5 million people have now had their first vaccination. Now, a 5-step plan for easing Northern Ireland out of lockdown has been agreed by the executive at Stormont. It says the plan is careful, cautious and hopeful, but it doesn't actually specify any timetable for easing the lockdown. Our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy explains more.
Fancy a cocktail? No night out though. Takeaways at this once lively pub in East Belfast have been keeping a bit of business ticking over during the doldrums of lockdown. Pubs that only serve drinks will reopen in stage 4 of the executive's plan, but when that will arrive isn't clear.
We're still in the dark. We've been closed for 7 months last year. We're now closed for 3 months at least this year.
What were you hoping for?
I wanted to be open on the 1st of April or the 12th of April or by the 29th of April, but we wanted some clear indication on a date.
How quickly Northern Ireland moves through the 5 stages of its plan, how quickly places like this can open again, will all be dictated by key health figures such as the R number, hospitalisations and the number of people who've had the vaccine. By not including dates, ministers have left themselves room to go more cautiously if cases were to rise again. But for many, that's the biggest source of frustration.
We will not be driven by hard dates. We recognise that everyone will be looking for certainty, but we do not want to set potentially unachievable dates that will only disappoint.
Places that don't sell alcohol, like this bakery and cafe on the north coast, will get to open earlier in stage 2.
We really felt a social responsibility here, especially in a sort of small town. We don't want to open unless it's totally safe to do so.
While school pupils in England can return on Monday, in Northern Ireland it's only some in primary and those taking exams, with most staying home till after Easter.
I think we have traditionally been more cautious. We have also had probably more time to think and learn from the mistakes that have perhaps been made in other jurisdictions.
The effect of lifting restrictions will be measured constantly and will be reviewed every 4 weeks. We will begin to taste freedom, but it will only come gradually, so don't put that big night out in your diary just yet. Emma Vardy, BBC News, Belfast.
A BBC investigation has found evidence that China's policy of transferring hundreds of thousands of Uyghurs and other ethnic minorities from northwest Xinjiang to factory jobs often far from home is being used as a method of uprooting and assimilating the population. It's also uncovered possible connections between these workers and some major international brands. China says that transferring workers away from the region is a way of tackling rural poverty and unemployment. Our China correspondent John Sudworth has this report.
At this factory, the Uyghur workers are clearly visible, more than 2,000 miles from home, brought all the way to central China by a massive relocation scheme. Now the BBC has found compelling evidence of how it works. In this Xinjiang village, the authorities need 100 people to send to jobs on the other side of the country. They set up a stall, but this 2017 state media report shows no one's interested. So they go house to house. If you stay here, this official says, you'll be married soon and never be able to leave. Will you go, he asks. No, she says. But with a mixture of propaganda and heavy persuasion, the young woman eventually agrees. I'll go if others go, she says. The BBC has new evidence that this separation from family and culture is, in part at least, precisely the point. A Chinese study produced for senior officials says labour transfers help assimilate Uyghur minorities, transform their thinking and reduce Uyghur population density. The study was posted online in error. Some of Xinjiang's mainly Muslim minorities are sent first to the giant re-education camps where China says it's fighting extremism, then to the factories. Very few have managed to leave China after their release.
There were 200 workers in the factory. We sold children's clothes and we are obliged to sing the Chinese national anthem. They said, the faster you work, the faster we'll let you go.
But most of those transferred to work have not been in the camps and are sent direct from poor villages. The study also outlines how they are transported in groups, accompanied by security guards, and put through political indoctrination.
This is just an unprecedented authoritative source written by really leading academics and former government officials with unprecedented high-level access in Xinjiang itself. That drives home the implications of what is going on here. There are higher goals of manipulating population density and demographics that, in my opinion, are very concerning, and they really point us towards crimes against humanity.
We found products that may contain yarn from this company on sale on Amazon in the UK. The factory says it no longer employs Uyghurs, and Amazon told us it doesn't tolerate forced labour. And this factory makes plastic mouldings for some major international brands. So we've spoken to one worker here who has confirmed that as many as a few hundred Uyghurs are employed in this factory. But unlike the Chinese staff, they are unable to leave the factory premises. In a statement, the Chinese government said the study seen by the BBC reflects only the author's personal view, and much of its contents are not in line with the facts. But in large part it echoes government thinking. Some Uyghurs, it concludes, are unwilling to leave their homes, a problem that should be tackled with strong guidance and persistent measures. John Sudworth, BBC News, Beijing.
Now, last night we brought you the story of 9-year-old Ahmed in the southern city of Taiz in Yemen, who attends school with lots of his friends close to the front line of the fighting in the civil war there. And millions of children are also set to suffer acute malnutrition, according to aid workers. The UK government is planning to reduce its aid on spending and cutting its donation to Yemen by around a half. Our international correspondent Ola Girin has the story.
Imagine if this was the school your child was going back to. The building and its pupils hanging by a thread. It's a snapshot of childhood in Yemen, a country that will now get much less aid from the UK. This is Ahmed, who touched many hearts in our story last night. He stands in when his teacher is absent. He's 9 and was born blind. He's a beacon of hope and resilience. Here in one of the world's poorest countries, the United Nations says cuts in aid will be a death sentence. The spectre of famine is hanging over this land. In Adala province, mothers queue to have their children checked for signs of severe acute malnutrition. Labour has accused the government of leaving children to starve. The Foreign Secretary says Britain is doing its bit and remains one of the top 5 donors to Yemen. Baby Hamas is the latest to be diagnosed. Nurse Abdullah Al-Qadri is pained by what he sees.
أحس بانكسار النفس أحس بانكسار نفسية أحس لأنه هذا شغلي يشعرني إيش يقولوا بانكسار الحالة هذاك لما تشوف زي هذا إيش تسوي له.
It's already too late for Saif Hassan. This video was taken the day before he died from hunger. His brother Abu Bakr was by his side.
يتنهس بس قلبه واقف كان والنفس فيه كان فيه به نفس
وقسينا قبل شوية حوالي ساعات وهو ينازع الموت ينازع حتى انتهى.
Safe lies buried here. Aid agencies warn cuts in funding will be measured in lives lost. Orla Guerin, BBC News, Southern Yemen.
The holiday park operator Pontins, which has 6 major venues in the UK, has entered a legally binding agreement with the Equality and Human Rights Commission to prevent racial discrimination in its booking policies. It follows the revelation that staff were warned not to book accommodation for undesirable guests, including people with Irish surnames. Critics said it was a clear attempt to keep Gypsy, Roma and traveller families from its holiday parks. Let's talk to our business correspondent Emma Simpson, who's with me. Emma, how did this come to light?
So this all came about after a whistleblower revealed that Pontins had been using a list of Irish surnames as part of a policy to prevent bookings from Gypsy and traveller families. It published this list on its intranet, calling them undesirable guests and telling staff to watch out for these names. Now, the Equality and Human Rights Commission also said that the company monitored calls at its contact centre, refusing or cancelling bookings made by people with an Irish accent or surname. Now, they said this was discrimination and breached the 2010 Equality Act. I mean, these are pretty shocking revelations, Hugh. And for such a big name in the holiday industry, a Downing Street spokesperson today described these practices as completely unacceptable. As for Pontins, its owner said today in a brief statement that it had agreed with the EHRC to further enhance its staff training and procedures to promote equality throughout its business. The EHRC said it must take appropriate action and learn lessons.
Emma, many thanks again. Emma Simpson there, our business correspondent. Now, the Cheltenham Festival is just a fortnight away and the racing world is facing new questions over its treatment of horses. The prominent trainer Gordon Elliott has been temporarily banned from racing in Britain after an image was posted of him astride a dead horse. And today a second investigation has been launched after a video emerged of a jockey at another Irish yard also straddling a dead horse. Our correspondent Laura Scott looks at the potential impact of these images.
Gordon Elliott has enjoyed life at the top of horse racing. 3 times he's trained the winner of the Grand National, twice with the lion-hearted Tiger Roll.
Tiger Roll, nurse to the elbow.
Now he says his world is crumbling in front of him after a distressing image emerged showing him sitting astride the body of a dead horse. An investigation by Irish authorities is ongoing, and until that's completed, he's banned from having runners in Britain. And today, another investigation into a different Irish yard. Cheltenham winning amateur jockey Rob James filmed straddling a dead horse as others look on and laugh. Both men have apologised, but many in the racing community are still reeling from the images.
Shocking, I think, is probably the first emotion that really came to mind, and then just sadness. You know, this is just not the norm that takes place in racing. Certainly in my experience from where I'm standing here today, I've never seen anything like that.
Deaths on training gallops are an unfortunate but relatively uncommon occurrence. Authorities have stressed that respect should be shown to horses during their lives, but also after.
This shows, or appears to show, a lack of respect and dignity for the animals with whom these people actually get a living.
Racing has sometimes struggled to convince those who think the sport is cruel that safety and welfare are central to its values. The fear is that years of hard work have been undermined.
It's one man's foolish mistake. Well, 2 men's foolish mistakes. And it's incredibly damaging and incredibly hurtful to all the people who work in the sport and do so for the passion of looking after horses.
With Cheltenham and Aintree looming, Elliott's owners have already started deserting him. Horse racing is in turmoil, facing questions about how its equine stars are treated behind the scenes at a time when it's about to take centre stage. Laura Scott, BBC News, Lambourne.
The reggae music legend Bunny Wailer has died in the Jamaican capital Kingston at the age of 73.
Just me and you, come on and steer it up.
He was the last surviving member of the group The Wailers, which also included Bob Marley and Peter Tosh. The cause of his death is unknown, but he had been in hospital since having a stroke last July. Now, the former Liverpool and Scotland striker and television presenter Ian St John has died at the age of 82. He was an iconic figure at Liverpool. Went on to be part of the hugely successful Saint and Greavesy, the ITV football show in the 80s and early 90s. Our correspondent Andy Swiss looks back at his life and career.
Amid Liverpool's stars of the 1960s, few shone as brightly as Ian St John. When he joined, the club was languishing in the second division.
In moves St John, he scores!
But St John's goals helped transform them into the best team in England. Under the great Bill Shankly, he won 2 league titles, but perhaps his greatest moment came at Wembley in 1965. That goal took Liverpool to their first FA Cup, and it made the man known simply as the Saint a club legend.
He certainly was an iconic figure because he came in at the very beginning. The club has moved onwards and upwards, but it wouldn't have gone anywhere if it hadn't had the contribution from people like the Saint.
He also starred for Scotland, scoring 9 goals for his country. And although he retired as a player in 1973, a new career beckoned. He joined forces with Jimmy Greaves, and their TV show Saint and Greavesy was a huge hit.
Well, hello and good afternoon.
Hey. The programme ran for nearly a decade, St John winning millions of new fans with his warmth and wit.
Hello there. Well, Euro 92 is all over. Jim and I are still here in Stockholm.
Can't get a flight home.
Jimmy Greaves himself led today's tributes, describing St John as a lovely man. He was one whose versatility was matched only by his popularity, both on and off the pitch, one of football's finest.
Tributes to the footballer and television presenter Ian St John, who's died at the age of 82. And that's it from us. Now on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Have a good night.